What is up, YouTube? We are here back with another Getting Started guide. Today we're going to be talking about transitioning from story mode to mapping mode. So transitioning from the beginning stages of your character and the formation of your character and getting early gear to the beginnings of your end game in Path of Exile, which are known as mapping or maps. So, what are the best ways to transition? What do you do after Act 10? So let's say you've just killed Kitava in Act 10. You've suffered your final penalty to your resistances for the game. So now you're sitting at minus 60 total resistances. So you've got some things to do. You need to get your resistances set up. You want to make sure that your HP is good, and then of course you want to start filling out your atlas being hotkeyed to G, and of course your atlas is filled with all of these wonderful different maps that you're going to explore and eventually hopefully fight the Shaper and other endgame bosses like the Elder, the Pale Council, and Breach Lords as well. But you can't get to any of that because let's say again, hypothetically, you just killed Kitava and you're wondering, you're probably in between level 65 to 70, maybe you're even as low as level 61, maybe as high as level 71 or 72 as you kill Kitava, and so you're wondering, hey, how can I efficiently get started into maps? So that's what we're going to take a look at today. The very first thing that we're going to take a look at today is experience and the way how experience works. So many of you may already know this, but there are penalties for dying in softcore. It doesn't remove your character, obviously. That's the difference between softcore and hardcore. Hardcore, you're going to transition from the hardcore league to standard. But death in softcore still has a penalty, and it's an experience penalty. So let's chat really quickly about experience and how we're going to go from the story to mapping. So in order to level up a character, it's necessary to get more experience. Hopefully this isn't news to any of you. Currently, there is only one source for experience in the game, which is killing monsters. Every monster gives experience depending on the type of monster, its rarity, the area level, and certain stats affecting the monster or the area it is in. The amount for the next level increases very fast. So we're going to jump down and we're going to talk about death. In default leagues, loss of experience is incurred upon death. So a default league being a standard or a softcore league. The penalty is a percentage of the total required for the next level, and it is applied as follows. So you notice in part 1 of the game, as you played through Acts 1 through 5, you didn't lose any experience if you died. However, in part 2 of the game, Acts 6 through 10, if you died, you suffered a 5% XP loss every single time you died. And then continuing on, there's a 10% loss whenever you're inside a map and you die, or if you're in a Forsaken Master mission or the Uber Labyrinth. It's a 10% XP loss if you die. So losing experience in this way will not cause you to lose your level. So if you're at 1% XP gained and you die in an area where you'd lose 5 or 10%, you simply drop back down to 0. You don't down level, you don't de-level. So this generates a problem for you as you've just killed Kitava and maybe your resistances aren't perfect, maybe your defenses aren't perfect, and you want to jump right into mapping and you're really, really excited. You're like, all right, dude, let's do mapping. I want to make currency and farm and be fast and have super awesome clear and go fill out my atlas and be awesome OP and go fight the Shaper and let's go do all this. This is great. Okay, slow down for a second. You're in between level 63 to 71. Let's take a deep breath. And let's figure out some tips to get you to a spot where you can start farming reliably your tier 1 maps and your tier 2, tier 3 maps. So the first tip that we've got for you is to avoid deaths, all right, because you have experience loss. You don't want to die a whole bunch. So this means early on when you are mapping, you don't want to be mapping on maps where you're using alks to turn white maps into rare maps. You don't want to be doing that because alks, using an alk on a map, can simply make it have additional mods on the map, which can make you die faster because there are more mods on the mobs that you're going to be fighting. The second thing that we want to take into consideration is we want to have reliable speed. So we want to avoid deaths, but we also want to kill lots and lots of stuff quickly because that's how we gain experience. So the third thing that we want to do is we also want to have consistent drops. Consistency in our drops allows us to farm a particular aspect of the market where we can either find a margin in a particular aspect of the market or at least build up currency, a particular currency that we want to use, whether that's because we're trading it, whether that's because we're flipping it, whether that's because we're simply turning it into chaos as a ratio. We want to be able to have consistency in our drops. So the solution to all of this, to avoiding deaths, to having a reliable layout for speed, and then to having consistent drops, is simply to farm the blood aqueducts. So it used to be way back in the day that people would farm the dried lake, but nowadays we farm blood aqueducts. So if you're wondering what are the blood aqueducts are a level 61 zone. They can be found inside Act 9, and they're the transitioning zone from Act 8 to Act 9. So typically whenever you need to level up or are behind in XP, you can use the very first zone in an act before you get to the act town. Usually they have good layouts, and you can simply farm them repeatedly. So it's a level 61 zone. So what does that mean for us and for our experience loss? How can we actually go in and effectively have experience gained in blood aqueducts if we're beyond level 61? Well, let's talk about experience penalties really quickly here. So experience penalties in Path of Exile happen as such. The players suffer a penalty to experience gained if a player is too far above or below the monster's level. So this creates a safe range where no penalty is applied, which is equal to 3 + 1 for every 16 complete player levels. So you can see this safe zone range that's shown here, this tier of safe zones, and you can see if your level is between 48 to 63, so let's say you finish the first 10 acts of the game and you're only level 62, you can go into blood aqueducts, obviously, and there's not going to be any penalty because you're level 62 or 63. The zone is 61, no penalty. You're within 6 levels of the zone. However, once you get up to level 64, once you ding 64, you need to be within 7 levels of the zone. So, in other words, that means that you can go from level 61 all the way up to level 68 before you start getting a XP penalty in blood aqueduct, which is huge. So you can simply reliably farm the blood aqueduct. Now, why is blood aqueduct so great? Well, let's go back over our 3 things that we want again. We want to avoid deaths. Blood aqueduct, it's not a very dangerous zone in terms of the stuff that can get rolled, right? It's not a map where you're adding affixes to monsters. You simply go and fight the regular stuff that you'd be fighting in Act 9, and frankly, it's easy mode. If you can kill Katava, you can go back and farm blood aqueduct, no problem. Reliable layouts. So the blood aqueduct layout is really, really simple. It's just 2 really long straight paths, and occasionally there's a bridge over that path. That's all it is. That's all it is. Now there's these side areas that you can also go down to, which usually have a rare or unique mob at the end of them, which is great. You can travel down to the sides. But other than that, it's incredibly reliable. It's just a straight shot, which means if you use shield charge, if you're using whirling blades, even if you're using flame dash, if you're using oh goodness, even lightning warp, like if you're using a movement skill, you're gonna love this layout because it's simply straightforward. You don't need to backtrack at all. You simply run on through it and you kill everything as you go. So it provides a reliable layout that you can speedily go through. And then lastly, hey, what luck did we get? It has consistent drops. So humility drops here in blood aqueducts, and humility gets you a tabula rasa. Now, the reason why this provides good farming consistency is because the tabula rasa, no matter what time it is in the league, whether it's the first weekend or whether it's the end of a league that you started playing Path of Exile, it does not matter. Tabula rasas always have value in the market because there's always players who are either leveling new characters and they want to buy a tabula rasa, or they have value because you can trade in a tabula rasa as a 6 link for a divine, and divine orbs always go up in price, almost always go up in price. Of course, I'm going to say that on the video, and then somebody's going to show me an example that they didn't go up in price, but they reliably go up in price from the beginning of a league to the end of the league until they match up with their price in standard. So a tabula rasa can be traded in for a divine orb, which always has value. So if you can farm blood aqueducts quickly, then it does all of this for you. It lets you avoid deaths because it's a low enough monster level and you're not rolling any sort of scary affixes, suffixes, prefixes on maps. It gives you consistent drops like humility, which can drop in blood aqueduct as well as other currency items. And then of course it's consistent, right? The layout is consistent, so we can do everything that we need to do, which is get XP, not die, and farm currency. We can do all that incredibly quickly. Blood aqueducts, if you want to reset a zone, you can simply go to the end of the zone, and once you're at either the town for Act 9 or when you're at the beginning of the zone. You can do it either way. You can go from Highgate or from the waypoint. You'll simply control click on the zone and you can create a new instance, so that way the zone has been cleared. This is how you can farm the zone again. You simply click new and you go back into the instance, but now it's going to be a new instance and there's going to be monsters again. And the layout may have changed a little bit, but again, it's Blood Aqueduct. It's always going to be just a straight line, which is great. The other small perk to this as you level is that Alva Valai is, of course, in every single instance right now in the Incursion League, which is great. But she appears very consistently either on the bottom left-hand side or the top left-hand side of Blood Aqueducts, which means it's not like you're farming a zone where you're going to go, hey, do I want to farm the temple or not? Where's Alva Valai? Where do I need to look for Alva? You can find her very, very consistently. So if your build is able to farm the temple and farm incursions, you can do that very, very quickly, very, very easily while you're inside the Blood Aqueducts. There she is, same place as the last example, just as a proof text on a very small scale of the consistency of Alva's placement. So, oh yes, look at this. Even maps can drop in Blood Aqueduct, which is great because in Act 9 and Acts 8 and 9 you can start getting map drops, which is great. So you're building your map pool, you're farming a reliable, consistent card in Humility, and then the layout is incredibly smooth and incredibly fast. It's very intuitive. So that's the Blood Aqueduct. You can farm it until level 68 when you're going to first start getting your first experience penalty. I actually farmed Blood Aqueduct all the way until level 71 this league before I started mapping because I didn't get enough cards to drop for my Humility. From level 64, I think, was when I started until 71. So I had incredibly bad luck. But usually about 2 or 3 hours worth of farming on Blood Aqueduct will get you a Tabula Rasa if you don't already have one, which is a great start for your mapping experience. Anyway, if you've got questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. As always, like and subscribe for more Path of Exile YouTube content and tips on an everyday basis here throughout Incursion League.